Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Enough to Keep Going podcast. This is episode number 114. We are getting up there in numbers. I think it's time to change the name again because it's been a while since we've done that. This is Tuesday, October 8th. We're in October finally. We'll get Halloween coming up here soon. We got the scary games. I think maybe some of you guys are playing right now. I think streaming maybe. I'm not going to stream any scary games because I don't do well with that. Maybe like old school Resident Evil or something, but that's about all I got.
I also stand against the notion of streaming scary games because of the month of October.
I'm the opposite. I just finished Outlast and it was rough.
Yeah, I thought you had some stuff in there that I saw you streaming. So we have a big show today. Actually, it's a Sony extravaganza tonight. Before we get to that, before we get to the Sony news, let's get to our other host for tonight. So tonight, let me introduce. We had some problems with our last, or a couple episodes ago, where we had Mr. Portero here on. Unfortunately, we lost that episode. So Portero, welcome to the show once again. And if you want to let us know like who you are, what you do, what games you like to play.
Absolutely. So I'm a Twitch streamer, Twitch TV/Portero, and variety streamer. So I play really a little bit of everything. We'll do first-person shooters. We'll do adventure games, Minecraft, Terraria. We'll do story-driven games. We've done Metro. We just did Outlast and Outlast 2. We'll do some League of Legends, Teamfight Tactics. We'll do a lot of interactive community stuff as well. So really spreads the gambit of different types of games.
Nice. That's cool that you do a little bit of everything. So you don't get stagnant. And nice to have you back and have you on.
Yeah, glad to be back.
And of course, we have the staple, the glue, the duct tape of the Enough to Keep Going podcasts and podcast network here, Mr. Gascles Stamos. Gascles, how are you?
Video games, let's go!
All right, let's jump to it because we got a lot to cover here. A lot of Sony news has passed from like mid to late last week, and then even past couple days that we've got a bunch of stories here. Excuse me. So first up, we have some new pricing for PlayStation.
Can we set a bar really quick? Because I just want to make sure that we understand this. So tonight's basically entirely a Sony PlayStation show, right? So Prime, remind me. So you don't currently own a PlayStation, but you came over to Xbox from PlayStation 3. Is that correct?
PlayStation 2, actually.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so I haven't had the last two consoles. PlayStation consoles.
Okay, gotcha. I have a PlayStation 4 now. So I've been PlayStation since I left Sega. Really, when the Dreamcast finally went the way of the dodo, and I'd had a PlayStation 1 before. So since then I've been PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, and PlayStation 4. I have never considered it my primary console. I have always considered either my Sega device or my Xbox as my primary console. And Portero, what do you have any experience with PlayStation or?
Very little. I've never owned a PlayStation myself. Just through friends and buddies playing with them. I've always been predominantly an Xbox gamer, and in the last 5 to 7 years PC.
Okay, so we'll be covering a gamut of perspective and opinion here from somebody who has remained outside of the PlayStation bubble, somebody who's midway, has the experience but has stepped away from it, and then myself who's currently in it. So good. It should be a good conversation. Sorry.
Yes, please take it away because it's all you tonight. I'm just kidding. So first up, we have PlayStation Now. Now I guess because you never subscribe to this subscription.
I also stand staunchly against the philosophy of subscribing to PlayStation Now.
Okay.
Yeah. In addition to Halloween and streaming spooky games.
Now you had said that because you didn't want to do like because the majority is like PS2 and PS3 games that they have on there, but they do have PS4 games. Would that change your mind or going forward maybe a PS?
No, so really my initial problem with this service when it initially rolled out, and the story we're talking about is the fact that strangely, very recently, there has been a discount to the subscription rates for the PlayStation Now service, which admittedly, a piece of the link that we're missing here is that I don't know how expensive it was before. I just know that I guess that it was more. So I want to say maybe it was 120 annually or something like that.
And actually, if on the blog post, they actually have the previous prices. So it was $20.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, $20 a month,
Gotcha.
24 or 45 a quarter, and then 100 for the year.
Okay, so they cut it. They cut the monthly rate in half. They cut the quarterly rate by whatever $20 is, or $45, and they cut $40 off the annual subscription rate. Okay, I got you. So the reason I've historically not been a fan of this is because initially when it rolled out, as we all know, the games were all delivered as a stream. So it was similar to the old OnLive service or NVIDIA's Shield streaming service, where the games were not you were not downloadable. You were basically, while everybody keeps running around, banging the hammer about Stadia being the Netflix of games, this was really the Netflix of games. It was all based on streaming technology. So if you had a hiccup in your network connection, that could potentially disrupt your game. They eventually came off of that position, and now I think at least some games are downloadable, but maybe not all. But by then, for me, the horse had kind of already left the barn. I mean, for me, it would need to be all. Like, I'm just not. And now I'm realizing how much of a hypocrite I am. For PlayStation, although I see the logic in Stadia, for PlayStation, if I'm going to have those games, I'm going to play backwards compatible games, I want to be able to download them. This is also from the perspective of somebody who kept their PlayStation 3, and I'm like, if I want to play a PlayStation 3 game, I'll just go buy like a $5 used copy from GameStop.
Yeah, so right now it looks like only PS4 games you can download onto the PS4. It doesn't mention anything about the PS3 and PS2 being downloadable, so that's just pure streaming as far as this article goes. Yeah,
and that makes sense to me. I also, of course, this article is from the PlayStation blog itself, so it's kind of like the from the mouth of the propaganda. So it's so interesting to me that the first line is, PlayStation now is the first and only console game subscription service that uses cloud technology to deliver an unprecedented breadth of games through streaming and downloading. Really? I'm pretty sure the Xbox delivers subscription games through the cloud. I'm pretty sure Nintendo delivers subscription games through the cloud. They're not all live streamed, but I wouldn't tout that as an advantage. So it's just an interesting perspective how they promulgated this. I mean, doing these prices. So Portero. So one of the changes and shifts that we're seeing in the industry, and one of the things that I've contended, particularly for for people who might be looking at it from a parental perspective, is what these services do is they go, when little Billy comes to you and says, "Hey, Mommy, Daddy, I want the next console thingy, the next PlayStation thingy," the thing has always been, oy vey, I got to go buy the kid the console, and I got to get him 2 or 3 games out of the bat. The interesting thing about this model, along with the Xbox, is this notion that now you can just go pay the upfront money for the console, and then just sign up for the subscription service, and you're like, Billy, you're not getting any games. You're just going to, subscribe to the service, which starts to beg the question of maybe why there is not a PlayStation SKU that doesn't have an optical drive. But at any rate, would this type of service, with the price reduction, make a PlayStation platform appealing to you?
I don't think so. I'm very much like you. I think, especially if it's not the up-to-date releases and it's backwards compatible games, it's very far and few between that I find myself wanting to go back and play a game that old. And if I do and I don't have it, there's a great example. This summer, for some whatever reason, I was like, I really want to play Skate 2. And I had a copy and couldn't find it, lost it somewhere in a move somewhere. So I went to GameStop and bought a used copy for $4.99 and hooked up my old Xbox and played that. So I think just financially and practically for myself, it doesn't pull me in or anything, because it's so far and few between that I would save more money just buying a used copy of the game when that desire comes up versus a subscription-based model.
So you said you're an Xbox gamer, right?
Yes.
Portero? Do you subscribe to Game Pass?
I should clarify. Xbox is what I played when I had a console, and Xbox 360 is the last console I had.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so no.
Right. I was just wondering. No, I wasn't trying to like call you out or anything, but I was wondering if like
No,
if
fine.
you did Xbox, if you did Game Pass, like if you had PlayStation, what eventually would you go into game now?
Well, and while we're table setting, just to ask the question, right? Because theoretically, where the industry is heading is eventually that question won't even matter, right? Prime is like what Xbox and PlayStation and EA and all these things are heading for is landing at a place where they go, you don't have to have my hardware. You can still subscribe to my service and you can play it on anything. So I guess just to gauge all of our like levels for, I mean, Prime and I know that we both subscribe to Game Pass. I think Prime, do you do the dance back and forth where you like might subscribe and then let it lapse and then resubscribe to it when something pops in, or are you just auto deduct every month?
No, yeah, I was flipping back and forth at first, but now with the Ultimate Game Pass, I'm probably going to go for like a whole year, more than likely, or maybe just like a quarter. I don't know. I forgot how they do their breakdown, but yeah, with Ultimate Game Pass right now, I'm doing it monthly right now, but I'm probably going to just do a year eventually.
Okay, and then Portero, do you subscribe to any gaming subscription services from any of the publishers or anything?
Probably the only thing that would be close is I have a subscription-based Minecraft server that I run for my stream.
Okay, all right.
Is that the Realms?
Yeah, yep. So I just do it through Microsoft and through Minecraft through the Realms.
Okay, and you don't do the Humble Bundle subscription?
I do not.
Okay, all
right. So yeah, I mean, I guess there's a couple things here. Well, I guess they really didn't like make a huge deal out of this, but I know they're always touting how they're always about the gamer. They're the first ones to say, hey, we're bringing out a console next year, or we're bringing out a console soon, which is PS5 now. It's going to have optical drive. It's going to have total first party support. And then they kind of bring this out. It's like, now they're starting to like teeter the other way. It's just kind of weird, I guess. I don't know. Just to me, just because I don't have a PlayStation now, and I'm not in that culture.
Right. Well, the question that runs for me a little bit is, so fine. We all agree, kind of, this is not for us, right? We get it. The question then becomes, as analysts, right, and students of the industry, who do we think it's for? I don't know who does this, right? You've laid out the money for a PlayStation 4. You have the latest, greatest, cutting-edge technology to play all the latest, greatest games. You can have your own library. I mean, to me, maybe the only reason to do this would really be to access the PlayStation 4 library as a subscription service. Like, paying $60 a year to access PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 2 games, that doesn't seem like a good value proposition to me. And then when you think about this overall, and this is going to be curious on how they kind of, twist this up for PlayStation 5, is the value position now is it's $60 a year for PlayStation Now. There's no combo discount, right, for PlayStation Now and PlayStation Plus. So you kind of sort of have to have PlayStation Plus. That's another $60 a year. So it's $120 a year, $10 a month. Now, maybe the value position is I buy the PlayStation 4, I pay basically $10 a month, and that, which would, to the tune of what would be 2 new video games, and I'm able to play. I mean, Prime, do you know anything? I know DBQ would know this. What's the PlayStation 4 offering? Is it? I mean, it's not day and date like it is on Game Pass. So no. Do they incrementally drop things to PlayStation 4 like every now and then, or
for PlayStation Now? You mean? Or?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was going to be my other thing. So they have a list here. They're like, hey, here's our first wave of new content, and it's God of War, Grand Theft Auto 5, Infamous Second Son, then Uncharted 4. I'm like,
these are launch window games.
I know. That's why I was like, okay. I mean, with Game Pass, you get stuff day and date now. I mean, yeah, that's only been happening a year, but still, I mean, maybe a couple years. But I just didn't see like this is okay. I mean, those are good games. Wow. I'm sure those are great games, but.
Yeah, but we go back to, you can easily, I mean, if you've got the console, you can easily get a copy of God of War off eBay, for I'm sure $5 or $10. Infamous Second Son. I mean, look, I'll give you my copy of Infamous Second Son, right? So, I mean, yeah. This is, and we're going to talk through this a lot tonight. This is one of those weird things where we go, we look at these prices, we look at the offering, and we go, man, Sony certainly seems out on like cloud nine where they think that this is palatable, but then somewhere some PlayStation owner is paying for this.
So at this point, do you think it's? I mean, as you mentioned, the future could be moving toward this cloud-based streaming subscription service for games. Do you think that they're potentially just working preemptively to get a groundwork and know that it's not necessarily a moneymaker or ideal composition right now, but they're trying to lay that and almost hedge their bets of this is where we think it's going, so we want to get in and try to work on it early and work some of the kinks out and see what it is?
I don't know, because this service has been around for a while already. I mean, maybe the new content. I want to say new content. That stuff has started out relatively recently, I'm assuming. Or maybe these 4 games are the first, like I said, the first wave. I don't know if they've kind of kept up with that before, but I don't.
It's weird. I mean, this is the lineage of Gaikai, right? Which was the service that they bought in the PlayStation 3 generation, so that they wouldn't have to build this technology themselves. I want to say that my understanding is that the Gaikai initiative basically. It seems like I seem to remember that they pivoted and went to a different technology, and so basically the investment that because I remember there being a blurb where we said that so that investment, that millions or billions of dollars that they spent on Gaikai basically got flushed down the toilet because it didn't really prove itself out. I think this service is built on something else. They've been at this for a while. It's really weird to me. They are kind of touting now that they're going to be innovative with cloud technologies and stuff.
Yeah, didn't this release like within that first year, right, of the PS4? If not, like maybe within the first few months. Excuse me.
It came before Game Pass.
Yeah, I know that. I was
just out there.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe second year. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, so it's been around quite a while. So. I think their big thing was that this is you can get PS2 and PS3 games, which is fine. I mean but I mean before it was what, $20 a month. I mean that's a lot for old games. I mean before this price cut. So maybe if they started with this pricing, it would have been a little bit better.
It says January of 2014 is when it launched.
Okay.
Yeah, so the thing just shipped in November of 2013. So, I mean, fairly at the very beginning of the life cycle.
So launch window, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And it was their answer to backwards compatibility.
Right. Okay, yeah. I remember that now, yeah. All right, well.
Cringe. That's the only thing that comes to mind when the service comes up.
I mean, I guess it's good now that they're starting to, add this newer stuff, and then maybe eventually they'll have the day and date stuff like Game Pass does, and maybe with PS5, next year, they'll start doing that, to try to make it, a little bit more attractive. So we'll see. All right, so next up here we have some more Sony goodness. Cross-platform multiplayer access for all developers is now out of beta, which I didn't even know it was in beta, to be honest with you. This was just announced, a couple days ago? Yesterday, I believe. Or I think it was actually last week, sorry. I'm looking at the dates here, and they're reversed. So this is out of beta, and it's open to any developer out there that wants to use cross-platform. So basically now, PS4 can talk to not just PC, which they've done in the past, but they can talk to Xbox, they can talk to Switch, all these other services or consoles, and have games. And there's some games already that have done that within the past year: Rocket League, PUBG, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, Dauntless, Paladin, Smite, and Realm Royale. And then I guess the big one coming up is going to be Call of Duty Modern Warfare. So, I mean, once again, it's a cool thing that they're doing. I know they got a lot of flack in the past about this, especially from what was it? I think Fortnite. Was it a year or two ago where they accidentally flipped it on, and everybody was playing with everybody, but then they had to turn it off or whatever. So because of Sony, but little late to the party. But it's cool that they're starting to do this now, at least in my opinion, so they can have everybody fight against each other. So I don't know what you guys think. If this really matters to you, do you really care? Or just another kind of cool thing that's popped up.
Yeah, I think it's a big thing. I can't believe that it's taken this long for it to become kind of a mainstream thing. And I mean, even you mentioned the Call of Duty. I was playing the Call of Duty with a bunch of buddies on the beta, and it's fun and refreshing to not have to worry about if this person's on PC versus PS4 versus Xbox or whatever. You all have a game and you can play, and I think it's a great step forward to hopefully make that a little more readily available.
Yeah, guess please.
It becomes an interesting social dynamic, right? Just like Portero just mentioned, it removes that heavy conversation of, do you have it? And for people who are multi-platform, it's, do you have it? Are you getting it? And what system are you getting it on? Right? It's kind of been the conversation of our lives for the last 10 years or so. From a business aspect, I feel like I want to call shenanigans on this because, it's out of beta. Where when there was this very lengthy dialogue in the media between the media and Sony about and the development community, right, about, hey, the way to do cross-platform is there. The way to do it is work with your account manager. And then we had all these horror stories of like, well, my account manager says that I can't do it, but this account manager told that dev that they could do it, right? And this raging inconsistency and the lack of harmonization of the different messaging that was coming from different Sony executives. So, beta. I don't know that it's called a beta when you just have technology that you refuse to let people use. That's not really the definition of beta. So, but there we are. It's going to be interesting to see how it progresses again with the leadership shuffles at Sony. I'm very curious. What we haven't really heard, I think, is what do developers really think about this from the perspective of cost, schedule, development effort, and how they're trying to position their games in the market. Right? We've heard that to a certain extent. I don't know. I feel like we've heard some of like the spiritual reasons to do it, like the good gamer aspect, but like I haven't heard. I mean, what it seems like to me is in code, this is additional modules, right? There has to be an additional arbitration layer between different types of network code. I haven't heard about middleware and APIs and standardization of netcode arbitration between PlayStation Network and Xbox Network and PC, and like what services. I mean, I'm sure every service has its own like authorization and access protocol, right? Like, this is how I check to make sure that this user is registered, has paid, and is allowed onto the platform, right? I'm very curious to start hearing those conversations and to also then see the industry move towards, and sometimes there are these things that they don't get talked about. Like years ago, none of us understood what Cloudflare was, right? Or why it was important. And then we found out, like 92% of the internet runs on Cloudflare, right? So I'm curious to see if we wind up seeing like a very large kind of monolithic middleware service layer that winds up becoming the cross-platform, cross-domain solution for all gaming technologies. It would seem like that would be a better solution towards to everybody kind of pick and packing and like doing this individually amongst themselves. With different implementations.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it'll probably head that way eventually, but probably not anytime soon, just because everybody still is kind of in that enclosed, like, little ecosystem that they want to be in. But yeah, I mean, it would be nice. And just thinking back about like when people were the developers, the few developers that were kind of ragging on Sony about this. Was like Rocket League or Psyonix, who does Rocket League, and Epic with Fortnite. I mean, they had already had their games established out there, and this was kind of an add-on. But if you're like a new game coming in, and, that is something now you got to think about. Like, do I want to do it? I want to have this totally open for everybody to do, and I got to spend all this extra time. Do I just throw it out there and I can do it later? I mean, that's more things that they have to think about now. So. But yeah, we'll see. It's good.
Some of my kind of first thoughts reading this article were, if cross-platform becomes the standard and the regular here, how does that affect? You kind of mentioned everyone has their own ecosystem. How does that affect that ecosystems? And do we see consoles start to emphasize, their hardware a little bit more? If say, does that take away importance of exclusive titles? If 90% of the games you can play on whatever, and you can still play with your friends, whether you're on an Xbox or a PlayStation or a PC or whatever it is, I guess, my first thought was, how does that affect those ecosystems that you had mentioned, and what changes are we going to see in those if that becomes the regular?
So I actually feel it makes console exclusives actually more important, right? Which is weird. This generation, this whole thing, we were convinced, we had conversations on this podcast, right, and the predecessors to this podcast, that in console generation 7, that the importance of exclusives was largely on the wane. Like, it really just didn't matter that much, we felt like, because of the predominance of third parties and that being what so many people played. Now it's risen back to preeminence, and when you mix in the cross-platform stuff, I actually think it makes it more important, right? Because now it's like, it doesn't matter what platform I buy for these third-party things, because I'm going to be able to play with my friends. So now I no longer have a thing about I need to be on the same console my friends are on. Mm-hmm. But what I do need is to be on the platform that has the exclusives that I want to play. So, most of my friends are on PlayStation. Now I don't have to be on PlayStation to play with those guys. What I really like, though, is Halo, so now I'm free to buy Xbox. Whereas before, I'd really like to buy Halo, but all my friends are over on PlayStation.
Like you mentioned, it almost seems like it comes full circle, because I think back to my high school and middle school days where, everyone was playing Call of Duty, whether you're on Xbox, PlayStation, but, so you always had a group of friends to play with. That didn't really matter. But then it was, do you want to play Halo with your group of friends, or do you want to play Uncharted with your group of friends? And it was, making that decision on which one you want to get and which console to go for and who has what. And like you're saying, you've seen the prominence of exclusivity kind of go up and down here. And I tend to agree with you. I was battling in my head with that thought of, does that make it more important or less important? And you could make arguments for both, I think, but I think I tend to lean towards the more importance with exclusivity as well.
Yeah, and I think the proof of that we're seeing is, we've seen Microsoft take action to buy more studios, and we have Sony, voicing indications that they are poising to do the same thing, right? They've already acquired Insomniac, which was a very aggressive move. And their senior leadership is on record saying that they definitely have interests in buying more studios.
Yeah, could you see exclusive games being negative too? I don't know if this is kind of part of this, but with Call of Duty, I think it was last week they had mentioned this, or this came out, is Sony has an exclusive on a mode within Call of Duty that's a year now,
which actually has been backtracked now.
Oh, has that been backtracked?
It got so much flack that they put back on it. Yeah, that's at least what I read on Twitter. So that's not a credible source, but
it's on the internet. It's got to be true. But there's stuff like that though. We've seen that before with Destiny, where they had I think it's just exclusive weapons and maybe a strike, or I forgot what they're called, raids or so, whatever the smaller group outings are in Destiny that they had for a year. And by the time you come around to it, are you really going to care on Xbox? This one strike is on there, but this was a whole mode. So I don't know how that's going to affect everybody in the future with them trying to get exclusives. Now, obviously that's a third party one. So and there's probably 3 or 4 or 5 other modes you can play, but still it's something that's not in the game.
It's hard for me to comment on whether or not it will matter, because I get so angered when this topic comes up that this is a thing that I feel is largely driven by a failure of gamers to understand how the industry works. And what I want, the reason we do this podcast, right, is because at least I feel if you love a thing, it's a good thing for you to understand how that thing gets made. right? Like, if you love motorcycles, most motorcyclists eventually figure out how motorcycles get made, right?
I don't know. I like hot dogs, but I don't want to know how those are made.
Not everything, but this is I saw one of these conversations going on, and the person was like, well, it's wrong because the $60, because you're getting more for the $60 that you pay for the game than the $60. Like, your $60 doesn't exclusively pay for the game's development on a unit base cost, right? That unit that it is largely like college sports, right? The college's football team tends to make the money that allows people to play other sports, right? So a football ticket that costs $20 is not the same as a lacrosse ticket that costs $20. They're the same price, right? But this is why you can pay $60 for a video game that has 80 hours of content, but still have to pay $60 for a video game that has 24 hours of content. Because those costs are largely peanut buttered and level loaded across the entire release portfolio of a given publisher for a year. So you can't count matchsticks, right, and go onesie twosie, and like, because they have an exclusive mode, they're getting more for their $60. I mean, it's a factor you have to weigh in terms of value, but at the end of the day, like, you just need to decide what games you want to play, and getting angry because another platform gets something that you don't, like, doesn't really make a lot of sense if you understand how the industry works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just threw it out there just because I know that happens all the time.
No, I
get all upset.
I know.
So they get all bent out of shape about, some dinky thing not being in their game. But like I said, I mean, there's like 4 or 5 other modes you can play. So
it's not
a big deal. I mean, I don't really care. But
and I'm getting up on my soapbox a little, but it's like it's not even a matter of like whether or not they actually want the mode, right? This is the argument that happens between my kids, right? One kid is mad because the other kid got something. I'm like, you just told me you were full. Yeah, but she's getting so and so. But you're full. Like, no, we don't like, that's not the meter of the yardstick. So yeah, I'm sorry.
I had no idea that mode was even still in the game. I mean, granted, I haven't played a Call of Duty that much in a long time, but I didn't know they were still even having that mode. And yeah, everyone, I think a fair majority, not a majority, but a fair amount of people get up in arms just to get up in arms, like you're saying.
A loud minority. Right. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And to round out like how that happens and why that happens to people, PlayStation players are getting that because Sony electively chose to give Activision more money.
Yep.
Right? So PlayStation players, you could argue, deserve that additional content or are entitled to their additional content because their platform provider paid that extra fee. If you want that mode, jump up and down with Microsoft. Don't yell at Activision. Jump up and down to Microsoft and say, hey, can you guys please pay Activision more money to get us an exclusive mode? Like, that would be jumping up and down about the way the industry actually works instead of making an issue out of nothing.
Yeah. All right, let's jump here. Did you put these The Last of Us stories in here, I guess, Cleese?
I did. We're probably running a little tight on time, so we can...
Do you want to jump over those?
We can just mention them. I mean, so look, if you're really interested in The Last of Us Part 2 Collector's Edition, you can go look it up on IGN. Look, there are multiple SKUs, and if you want to pay more money, you can get extra stuff. We've talked on this podcast a lot about, like, do collector's editions really matter, and do they mean anything, and like the subjective value, and then digital sales throw that all askew. But if you want to get the top line collector's edition, it comes with a steel book, special packaging, a mini art book, a little prop. You get Ellie's bracelet, some pin stickers, a set of avatars, a soundtrack, and an art book. What's interesting is you get the making of documentary, which I think, for being able to take a peek inside Naughty Dog, I think that's actually of significant value. The reality is that documentary is probably eventually going to wind up on Netflix or somewhere where you can watch it for free anyway. So, but there's that. The special edition is about half as much, and you get the game, thank goodness, the mini art book, a steel book, an avatar, and dynamic theme, and then the regular one you get other stuff. There is a Ellie edition which comes with like a backpack and things like that.
Statue, yeah.
Yeah, what's interesting to me is it seems like every time one of these things comes out, there's always some horror story involved with it. About people don't get their stuff, or the thing that was in it is of like low quality, and like I know the only one of these that I have ever thought was like really awesome was Call of Duty, like where you actually got like an RC car or a tank or something like that.
Night vision goggles or something.
Yeah, but you know the reality is people who really love The Last of Us, like they know about this stuff, so it's there if you want to get it.
Yeah, I never get too bent out of shape with all these special and extra special editions that they throw out there. It's like, all right, I mean, I think I've bought maybe 2 in my whole life, special editions. It's not a big deal. Like if I see something cool, like, oh, it's kind of cool, I'll get that. But otherwise, it's like, all right, cool. I'm just not gonna buy it. It's fine.
Yeah, like I don't hate the industry for making it. It's not a thing I rail about like they shouldn't make it. I think for people who are hardcore collectors, right, who are probably the people who, well, they are the people by definition. They're the people who say I want my physical media so I can like put my case up on a shelf. This is great incentive for them and for collectors. As you mentioned, the only stuff I ever go after is if there's like a VIP pass or a season pass or something like that, the physical stuff, because I've moved so many times. Like I just don't need more boxes.
Yeah. But Tara, are you a big special edition guy, or have you ever bought?
I don't think I've ever bought a special edition of a game. There's never been a game that I've really wanted that stuff, but I do like the idea. I mean, if there was a game that I liked that had this stuff, obviously I love the little trinkets and stuff. We've got some League of Legends stuff, some Fortnite stuff in the back. I like the little fun physical trinkets to have and display and stuff. So I'm all for it. I just haven't found a game that, you know, that has a statue or a physical trinket that's enough for me to pay that, you know, hefty increase.
No Outlast trinkets that you want.
Trying to forget that as quick as possible.
All right. There's another. I think you had another Last of Us here, I believe, on some accessibility options that they got going in the game. I don't know if you put that in also. I guess, please. Nope. Can't hear you. Terry, can you hear him talking?
I cannot.
We cannot hear you right now. Nope.
Still nothing.
Have some issues here.
Man,
right?
Bad luck.
You're fine. We got halfway through the episode. That's fine. Well, let's jump ahead past that one. Just chime in when you get a chance. I guess, please. I don't know if you need to drop off and come back or whatever, or turn things off. But next one here is play another PlayStation 4 update that's coming out. You can stream, or I guess what do they call it here? A second. I guess stream to Android devices now. I guess it was only you were able to do this before, but kind of like I don't know if there's anything you can't really do that with Xbox right now. I guess kind of in Xbox you can do the remote play. That's what I was trying to think of, remote play. You can kind of do it to PCs or like I've done it on my Surface before and stuff like that. So Sony's you can do it now on Android. Anything with Android 5.0 or above, any kind of device that you might have. So you can stream a game. This is kind of what xCloud will kind of do at one point. Well, actually, it's not xCloud; it's the streaming part of their online service. Does remote play interest you at all, Portero? I did it a couple times on the Xbox just to see if I could do it, and it was fine. But I don't think I've ever used it past those testing stages.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely interesting, and this was news. I didn't know this was a thing until I read this article, and yeah. I think it's definitely interesting. It seems, you know, a way to kind of compete a little bit in mobility with practicality stretches, really.
Yeah.
So, are you guys hearing me now?
There we are. Now I can hear you.
Yeah, I think I was fidgeting with the cable, nervous twitch. And, well, like I said, weird thing. OBS still had it, but you guys don't. So I apologize about that.
That's all right. We were talking about the remote play for Android devices now. I don't know if this interests you at all. If you even have any Android devices, I don't know if you're an Android guy, or you can do it on iOS too. Evidently, and Portero made a good point. Like I didn't even know about this art. I saw this article. So
yeah, no, I don't know. This is one of those weird things we talked about it on the podcast before too. Where like when the initial implementation of something like this is bad. Like there are some users who just never go back to it, and the initial implementation of remote play on the PlayStation 3 was bad. It had the whole goofy thing of like, even if I was on my local network, like my phone would have to go out to the internet and then come back into my local network to talk to my PlayStation, and I was like, this is dumb. So I've just never gone back to it. And again, if I have a PlayStation, why would I want to play on my phone? Now, the interesting thing is this would enable you to kind of keep campaigns on the go, but that's why you buy a Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, that's what we were kind of comparing it to that. The reason they're kind of touting this right now. So, and I think with this update on the Android devices and then the newest updates on iOS 3, you can pair a Bluetooth the DualShock 4 to the phone or tablet or whatever you got. So.
Yeah, the thing that'll be interesting about this from a tech and business perspective is the requirement is it has to be Android 10. Android 10 is just being released. The Pixel 4 theoretically gets announced next week on October 15th. Nothing runs Android 10 right now, except maybe my Essential phone PH1, which amazingly gets like faster updates than a Pixel.
3 does. So, Pixel 3 does.
Right. Oh, does it? Well, is it the officially released 10, or are you running? Okay, so
no, it's officially released. Yeah.
Okay, what will be interesting with this is that for 2020, supposedly there is a Google Managed Services edict that is coming out that says in order for you to utilize Google Managed Services, if you are releasing a new phone, it must be running the current version of the operating system. So that will get rid of the thing that Android has always had, which is a new phone is coming out, the new version of the Android operating system is out. However, this new phone that's releasing for some reason is launching with the past version. This may impact the availability of remote play on more phones because more of them will be required to run this version of the operating system.
Nice. Yeah, but I mean, it's cool if this works a little bit better. I think you were able to do remote play to the what was the little handheld? I want to say PSP, not PSP. What was the
Vita?
Vita, yeah.
Vita, yeah.
And there's always been.
I think DB might have mentioned that before. I don't know if it actually worked, so maybe not because I can't remember.
Well, the interesting thing is I don't know how many of you remember the old PlayStation phone that came out from Sony in the PlayStation 3 era, which was like originally the only phone that was compatible with remote play. And then when Sony started making the Xperia line of phones, they then obviously ported that capability over to there. So this is an outgrowth of remote play being usable on all mobile devices instead of it being locked to Sony exclusive phones.
Yeah, and they had. I think I mentioned this earlier when you were off the air. It was just stuck in the Xperia range of devices. So, but it's open to everybody now. So it's nice. Another nice feature. So let's jump into some departures, or a departure. Actually, I think there are a couple, but the one we're going to talk about here is Shawn Layden. He departs Sony Interactive Entertainment, SIE. He was the, let's see here, hold on a second. He'd done a bunch of things actually for Sony. He's a producer of software development for the Japan studios, and just he had a bunch of different things that he had done over the years. He was chairman of the Worldwide Studios here. It was his last role before he left here. So kind of, it was just kind of thrown out there on Twitter. At least that's where I found it. Just kind of, I don't know. I didn't really see it anywhere else for like a day. And then finally it kind of, people were starting to pick it up and say, hey, he's leaving. And there's another gentleman leaving too. I forgot. I can't remember his name. Or what what his role was within the company, but I think he was higher up exec. But so they had a couple of departures here in the last week or so. Actually, less than a week.
Yeah, their chairman or CEO of their Japanese PlayStation division was the other one who left, which was a big. That's where Kaz Hirai came out of originally before he took over. PlayStation, and then eventually went on to take over Sony overall. So a long history of strong leadership there.
Yeah, and then there's no mention of like the timetable when he's actually going to leave for good, or why. Which I mean, the why part's usually kind of just cookie cutter press release. Most likely they'll give out he's retiring or he's going to go on to another venture, or stuff like that. So.
Well, like you mentioned, this is the most interesting thing about it. This is casually thrown out in a tweet,
yeah.
Not a press release on like Sony's media page, right? Like this is a thing that has to be disclosed, right, to stockholders and shareholders and national financial compliance organizations like the SEC in the United States when a C-level officer leaves a company. So. It's very interesting how, it certainly paints the appearance that this was, either he was asked to leave, or just, out of frustration, chose to leave.
Yeah. And this came from Sony too. This wasn't even him. He wouldn't even, he didn't even go out there and say, hey, I'm leaving. It's just the company's
right.
saying.
Right. As far as I know, he has yet to tweet anything out about this.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything from him, either tweets or from like articles and stuff that I've read. So it's just kind of okay. He's gone, or he's going to be gone eventually. So we'll see what happens there, and that kind of leads into the next story, which is PlayStation gets a new president and CEO, Jim Ryan. He was.
Well, so if I can, I wanted to know about this a little bit. So Jim Ryan's not new.
No.
So the actual structure weirdly. So there was a big executive shuffle at the beginning of the year. Jim Ryan, who had been the deputy president of SIE, subordinate to a guy I forget his first name, named Kodera, who was the president of SIE. Those two swapped roles. So Jim Ryan became president and CEO of SIE. Concurrently, or right about the same time, Shawn Layden, who had previously been president and CEO, was elevated to this position of head of worldwide studios, which was a position that was exclusively and intentionally made just for Shawn. It didn't have, I don't think that it had a very clear or inarguable seniority to these other two C-level officer positions that Ryan and Kodera held, which is part of the scuttlebutt out in the industry that has caused a little confusion, because when people have heard a thing from Layden or Ryan or Kodera, they have not always been certain who's actually in charge of that aspect of the company. So with the departure of Layden, who is currently head of Worldwide Studios, Sony has not named a successor to that position, and as far as we can tell, they're not going to. The position, because it was made exclusively for Layden, when Layden leaves, it will just be dissolved, which in essence makes Jim Ryan now head of PlayStation.
Okay. It's not too confusing. Yeah. So
and just to put a final pat of butter on it, and Jim Ryan's legacy is that he was most prominently previously head of PlayStation Europe, which because PlayStation obviously owns its own market in Japan. Europe has become like a primary battleground between PlayStation and North America, where they essentially kind of compete on even footing, with that not being a native country for either of those two platforms.
Yeah. So I mean, do you see this as a good thing then, or is this something is there trouble afoot?
It's going to be interesting, and I don't know. I would contend. I mean, people, real journalists who are closer to this might have a better. I mean, everything that I've been able to gather is that what we have is Jim Ryan is pro-cloud, so he has, as far as I understand, he has criticized his own internal management and other executives for not leaning as far forward on cloud technologies and implementations as Microsoft has. Which one might think might have been behind the reason for the partnership between PlayStation. That might have been something that Jim Ryan was absolutely against, because he might feel like they should be building that out themselves. The interesting thing, and the most curious thing to me, is he was not a proponent of cross-play. was definitely one of the voices that said, no, we should keep this in our own house. He was the one who the quote is attributed to about, and I think it's foolishness, that, we can't just intermix our players with some other platforms players because then we can't police like their behaviors and keep them safe. And I'm like, PlayStation Network is a pretty toxic place when you open up communications to just randos. So I don't really know that you're protecting anybody. Like, So he has not been a proponent of this cross-platform stuff. However, in the wake of the announcement of Shawn Layden leaving, immediately we get the reduction in PlayStation Now pricing, which might be his pro cloud thing. But we also get the PlayStation 4 cross-platform play is now out of beta, which, again, could be his influence in, I think, like maybe slightly misrepresenting that position as being more altruistic than it actually is. But given his past background and position, you would think that that would not be the thing that would get announced, right, if he's stepping up to the throne. So I don't know. What I can say, I think the positive is that he was critical of the handling of the launch of the PlayStation 3. So as I, in another conversation with some other people, I don't think he's going to be of the mindset to launch with a $5.99 price tag. So it gives me greater confidence that we'll see the same $3.99 price tag that we saw for the PlayStation 4, I'm hoping. So I don't know. It's a mixed bag. It's probably the same way it is with any CEO, right? We're going to get some positives and some negatives. I think the unfortunate thing that colors a period of time of Shawn Layden's leadership is that there were some things that were just foolishness that seemed to not be handled from the top very well. Specifically the messaging on this cross-platform stuff, and some of the like absurd statements that came out of Sony leadership during the time.
Yeah, we'll have to see, what happens going forward. And just, they're talking in this article. They're talking to the. Let me get over here. Hold on a second. They were talking to the chief executive officer, and I'm not even going to try to say his name because I'm going to butcher it. But, he just says, he wants to, kind of mix things up and, get different people, in these groups. So, I mean, that does happen in business. I've seen it happen in places I've worked. So, I mean, it might not be a big deal. And we've seen, CEOs or, not CEOs, but higher level people like that leaving before. So, it's, if we see like a mass exodus, maybe, that'd be a problem. But, just having a couple people here and there going, we'll have to see what happens. Portero, any thoughts at all?
I do not know enough to comment.
Okay, no problem. All right, so let's we're running here at the hour mark here pretty soon. So let's get into, I guess, the big news of today. Actually, the official announcement of the PlayStation 5, and it is called the PlayStation 5. More than likely, I'm probably not going to PlayStation 5, at least not right away. I guess because we're talking, in the chat earlier today, I'm kind of a two-person console person. So, I have Xbox and Nintendo Switch right now. So I'll probably stick with that going forward. But, I mean, there's some pretty good details that came out today. Anything that like flew out at you, either to you, Gaskins, or Portero, that, would definitely make you, I mean, more than likely Gaskins, you're probably going to buy this because you usually buy, most things. But anything that's like jumping out at you that gets you excited about the PS5? I guess, Liz.
I'll let you go first, Portero.
No, it's just hard to pull me away from it at this point. To be honest, I've kind of become the PC master race person. It's just so simple for me with streaming and everything being in one. I think if I were to invest anything, it would be to get a 2 PC setup for streaming. I just don't see myself, and it's nothing against the drop or the launch or anything that's specific. I just don't see myself going back to a console for really any reason.
All right. Yes, please.
Yeah, and I can definitely commiserate with being multi-platform as a streamer. It definitely is just an exercise in making your life hard. But you're right. I mean, probably from a journalistic aspect and and wanting to cover, the state of the industry, I probably will. There's a good chance I'll just pre-order a PlayStation 5, which will be a slightly bolder move than how I've approached it the last couple generations. I find some of this a little worrisome in terms of my big concern with PlayStation has always been in their effort to reach for. There's always something about the PlayStation that I feel is extra, right? Like the cell processor on the PlayStation 3. Totally not necessary, right? The Blu-ray drive on the PlayStation 3, which wound up, I guess it was kind of a thing, right? I mean, I know for me, the same way it was, for the longest time, it was like the least expensive. It was my only Blu-ray player, in the house for a long time. So I guess maybe that paid off, maybe. There's a lot of things in here, which I'm glad to see that there's a focus on software implementations, which we don't always hear a lot about. Or at least some deeper level technical implementations, like the controller on the SSD, which I think in this article Mark Cerny kind of starts to walk around to, as I've long suspected. I'm like, and again, I get frustrated with some other podcasts where I'm like, they talk about, they're going to get an SSD, and like this is why an SSD is better, and I'm like, no, but what they're talking about isn't just like an SSD like you put in your PC, right? There's things that they're talking about this SSD doing that clearly mean it's some special sauce besides just a solid-state drive. And they start to talk about that a little. But what I start to get concerned about is a lot of this stuff is very complicated. The notion of partially installing games particularly concerns me in terms of you can choose to just install
like a multiplayer
the single-player
section.
version or the multiplayer section. And I'm like, that's great. What happens when I need a patch? Because there are components of the code that are common to both sides of those halves. There are parts of the code that are not. That's an extremely disruptive thing to lay on developers, right? To say, hey, you need to package your patches in such a way that you have to expect and accommodate that some players will only have the single-player version installed. So I'll tell you what my response to that is coming from a development perspective. I'm like, they're getting the whole patch. Oh, no, but we don't... Dude, they're getting the whole... I'm not going to onesie-twosie, like arbitrate, like, who gets what piece of content or what patch. They're getting the whole patch. So then you create this world where, as we've seen in some cases, right, you release a game like Gears of War 5, and it's 100 gigabytes, right? The patch drops and it's 25 gigabytes. Okay, so I'm going to game the system. I'm only going to install the multiplayer part. It's 32 gigabytes. But I'm going to get blown up with this patch that's like the same size as the installation that I just ran, right? So there are some things that are kind of, again, I'm like, these are kind of like, and again, my concern becomes, it has the feel of this stuff that Sony does just to make things complicated. Great, you're going to allow people only to install either halves. All of this feels like we're going to give you another 1 terabyte drive. I'm like, no, just give me a bigger hard drive, right? I don't need you, I don't need you to allow me to split the game in half. Just give me a bigger blasted hard drive, right, from the jump. So it's going to be interesting to see how this comes out. And again, a Blu-ray drive is complicated, but a Blu-ray drive is hardware. You just need enough blue laser diodes, right? Get them, right? That's a physical problem. When this whole shenanigans about like splitting the game up in half and like patching parts of it, when that goes sideways, that's not a thing that you unravel like with silicon, right? So it's I don't know. Sony always makes me white knuckle, right? As with the walk up, with like this 1 year walk up. So because we're getting on time, I actually, one of the things I'm more curious about than like the window dressing in this stuff and the things that they're talking about is, my question to you guys is, why now? It's October in the lead up to your final sales season of the PlayStation 4. You want to sell more PlayStation 4s. Why do you start talking about the PlayStation 5 in October? Why not wait and talk about it in February? This is the thing that is the most shocking to me. And part of it is, we talked about the executive shuffle. Is this CEO flex? Is this Jim Ryan going, Layden's out, I'm in, let me put my stamp right on the world and let people know like what my legacy is and what I'm bringing to the game?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question because it's a year out. I mean, I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't know what they were thinking at this point. I mean, did they really have anything coming out this holiday season or the end of the year as far as exclusives? I mean, I don't think so, right? I don't know.
Even if they did, like, the news is completely overshadowed by the drop of The Last of Us 2 release date, right? So, like, when people heard that, I think that they, like, turned off to anything else that's coming out between now and then.
Well, that's what I'm just kind of trying to say is, like, maybe, okay, they don't have anything, so they're trying to generate some kind of attention. Obviously, whether it be negative or positive, obviously it's kind of negative for the PS4 because people are like, all right, well, I know there's a system coming out next year, so I mean, do I really want to buy anything now or even get a system, with the PS4 now, or just wait, or what's going to happen? So I don't know what's going on with this announcement. If it just boggled my mind when I heard about it, because I was like, what, really? I mean, and at first I thought it was just more the news, the websites and stuff, just just throw stuff out there. But then I saw the blog saying this. It's just like, I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know what's going on. So to be honest with you, I don't know why they even thought about doing this now. More than likely, yeah, maybe there's just the new CEO saying, hey, we got this product that's still out there. Let's give. That's another thing when they announce this stuff. It's always like this technical jargon that the average Joe is not going to really care. And even like people like us, it's like, okay, it's got Rumble feature, it's got, SSD, it's got all this other stuff. That's cool and all, I guess. But, where are the games and stuff? What are we going to get out there? They say there's going to be a first party, awesome game, but they don't really say what it is, or they don't say at all what it is, or who's doing it and stuff like that. So I don't know.
So I wish I remembered or saved this. I had glanced at this Twitter today. It was something along the lines that there are dev kits out there already for the PS5 and stuff. Is this a stance to keep information flow in Sony's hands, so we're not dealing with any form of I'm sure they sign NDAs out the wazoo, but to not deal with any leaks or any misinformation getting out just because it's potentially out there now, that they want to keep this in their court and direct the information flow?
I mean, that's possible. I mean, it could be that, because one of the things that we heard coming out of, I think, not E3, but a later game show, so maybe TGS or Gamescom or something, but there was a pretty prominent developer or publisher who said, yeah, we don't have PS5 dev kits, and that kind of sent a shock of concern right around the media. It could be that with the renders that have been coming out with the PlayStation 5 dev kits, I mean, clearly they're starting to get out into people's hands. Maybe they were delayed. And yeah, maybe the timing still seems weird to me, but it could have definitely emerged out of dev kits were delayed. We had to ship them to get them into people's hands before devs take off for the holidays, right, for this year in order to get our launch window lineup in place. Now for, based on a, Lemony Snicket series of unfortunate events, right, it's October and now we have to get out ahead of this thing before any misinformation starts coming out. That's absolutely possible if I think about it that way.
Yeah, that's something I never even thought about. I didn't even know, these, I guess it makes sense that they have dev kits now. Obviously, first party studios will have them, but, if these third party, second party, third parties are starting to get them, it makes sense. Another thought I had, now I forgot what it was, but yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, obviously, we'll have the big blowout more than likely near or around E3 coming up next year. So, I mean, we'll have to see, what's going to happen with the PS5 and all these other systems that are going to be coming out next season. Excuse me. Any last thoughts on this? I guess you already had your concerns. I guess, Cleese, anything that you did like about what you read, or if you read these articles or any other articles?
As I mentioned, I'm all on board with. Well, there was mingled in this news was the notion that the triggers are going to be getting reworked and that you're going to get haptic feedback, which is, I guess, the way I think about it is higher fidelity rumble. Basically,
the HD rumble that the Wii, or not the Wii, I'm sorry,
the Switch.
supposedly.
Yeah, I mean, you could kind of think of it that way. I was glad to hear that the triggers are being reworked. I feel like the triggers have pretty much been historically horrible on the PlayStation for all time. I always buy third-party like trigger guards to have an actual lip that goes underneath my index finger to help with trigger pull and the feel, particularly for analog action. So I'm glad to hear that that's finally being reworked with the adaptive triggers. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, where I land on is it sounds like there is a lot of intermingling of what they're planning to do with this hardware package that is tightly coupled to dependencies on cloud and service implementations, and that the entirety of the capability set that they have lined up for this box to bring is not resident on the box itself. That, to me, is a high-risk deployment, because the services have to be right, the services have to be deliverable to all users at the endpoint, and it means that the biggest advantages of the box are not solely dependent and operable on the box as a standalone unit. This being for a company that has historically not kept up with Microsoft on infrastructure and services, and where their network outage of 2011, I talked to my guys about at work as a case study of what goes bad when you allow poor security practices and poor architecture to take place on a network, right? And how it's handled. That was only 8 years ago. So, man, like I said, there's a part of my brain that says you just need to pre-order this and lean forward. But there's the other 80% of me is digging its heels in, and the horses are pulling in the other direction going, you need to think about this as like an MMO, and just let this thing come out and let the services settle out. Because my fear is that this is going to be like a significant dumpster fire on release day.
Well, I'll have no comment on that one. I'll try to keep it positive. But no, I mean, we still have a whole year technically here, so who knows what's in store for us to come up. But like I said, more likely I'm probably not going to get a PS5, but whatever the next Xbox is. And just let me caveat that and say I'm not saying that because of the normal like fear mongering and FUD and like, oh, you can't call the thing bad when you don't know. I'm saying that because everything in this article reads to me is that you can't just buy your PlayStation 5 and take it home and take it out of the box and bring all of the capability by just plugging it into the network, right? It's you have a large operation center that has to be clicking and staffed and all the technologies worked, and like that's a significant amount of stuff to get wired up, right? Worldwide for a worldwide release, right? Because the last few releases have indicated that what the industry, we used to do staggered releases, right? We used to release a thing in North America and then Europe and then Japan. Yep. Last few console generations, people have tried to do the Big Bang Theory. That's a lot of server power that needs to be rendered and delivered to people. So it'll be interesting to see how this pans out. Yeah, we'll have to see going forward. Potero, any last words here before we close out for the night?
I got nothing.
All right, cool. All right, so everybody, that has been our Sony extravaganza. I think next week we have our GX show again. I don't remember who's going to be on that right now off the top of my head, but I believe it is myself and DBQ Hams. Portero, do you have any schedule on your streams or anything like that? Do you want to plug real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. I stream Tuesday evenings, Friday evenings, and Sunday mornings in Central Time.
All right, cool. I guess, please. I don't know if you have your schedule going right now. I think you've been.
Yep. I live stream Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, roughly 9:30 p.m. Eastern, until about midnight or so, or a little bit thereafter.
All right, nice. And I have just started to streaming and do video captures and stuff, so I don't have any kind of schedule yet. So I'm all over the place. So just check out my my YouTube channel, TomMaster99. You might see me on there at some point. So thank you, Portero. Thank you, Agasicles. It was another interesting discussion, and I think we've got it recorded this time. We had a couple of recordings going, so we should be good. Catch us next Tuesday, same time, 8:15, 30ish or so. We'll have our GX show, and everybody have a good night. we'll see you next time.